Okay, so welcome everybody to the first seminar for scaling and replicating your programs. This is Sam from Social Enterprise Academy for Frontier Incubators. Thank you all for joining today. Today's the very first one, so apologies if I'm a bit rusty, and thank you for bearing with the tech getting going. And hopefully you've all had a chance to watch the webinar that's been online. It went up about a day late, so I'm sorry if it wasn't enough time, but the part of the concept with scaling and replicating programs is that we're doing things slightly differently. So the webinars will be uploaded separately, and then the seminar is this one where we get to actually talk about some stuff and use this as a peer learning experience. So don't worry if you haven't watched the webinar yet. You can watch that in your own time and refer to it whenever you want. I hope it's useful. So today, put together a bit of an agenda for us. So we'll just do a bit of onboarding first, just find out who's here, and just make sure we're all signed up and we're on the same page. And just do a bit of tuning into what we're after from this program. We'll all be at different stages, and even folks that are really early in the journey can still use this as a chance to get some of the thinking ahead of time. So we'll see what we're going to do, and then we'll use the grow model as a bit of a format and see how that works around goals of this session linked to before you scale some of the topics that were raised in the webinar. We can then drive into some of the topics or things that you raise and just see what's going on for you. We'll then, as a group, look at potential options for how to solve some of your challenges, and then we'll look at ways forward and how we gain commitment. So we'll see if that works for a group. Might not, in which case we'll riff off in a different direction. But equally, if you want to talk about something that's a burning issue that's going on for you right now, that's nothing to do with the webinar, then still this is the place to do it, and we can use the time and we can use the collective power of all of our brains in the same space. So hopefully that's useful, and please do feel like you can raise anything that you want to for discussion. Okay, so by way of, I'm just going to flip the order a little bit. In terms of a group agreement or way of working, we're all still part of the Frontier Incubators team ever since Singapore. I think we've all been sort of signed up to collaborating and sharing knowledge and information and supporting each other as a group. So hopefully that will just continue in these sessions. In terms of things like confidentiality and so on, if people do want to raise stuff for discussion in the session here today, then please just be aware of what you're sharing and whether you're able to share it and whether this is the right format for it. But anything you do share, the group, again, since Singapore, has been very much collegiate in supporting each other with those issues. So maybe just hold on to what you share. But if you do, we can have confidentiality in place, or at least chat-mouth rules where you can use some of the knowledge that you gain, but just don't attribute it to who you heard it from or what have you. So there's just a couple of quick sort of group agreement elements just to reassert before we get going into the series. Has anybody got any other kind of group rules or anything like that they'd like to suggest before we get going and find out who's here and what we're all after? You're all very happy, content, comfortable. Great. Right. No swearing, please, we're live, and all that sort of stuff. There's a group agreement one. Right, and hopefully, as you all know, the more we all put into this sort of stuff, the more we'll all get out of it. So let's see what we can share. So right, to get going, very quick introductions. So you've already heard a little bit about me on the webinar. I'm Sam from Social Enterprise Academy, based in the UK. So that's the sun coming up behind me. It's nice and early in the morning. I do like the early mornings, and what better way to start than with you guys. The reason I'm here is that I've been a social entrepreneur for 20 years, and in that time have been starting and growing 7 different enterprises. And the Social Enterprise Academy recruited me as a young social entrepreneur about 15 years ago as one of the first facilitators. I joined the staff team about 9 years ago, and then for the last 6 have been replicating globally. So initially was growing the organization inside of Scotland, and then was doing the global replication that you'll see on the webinar. So been learning by doing, and helping others to scale their ventures as well. But this is a great opportunity to be talking about my experience of scaling a version of an accelerator, and really excited to be learning from you guys as well. So great opportunity to share. But so that's a quick intro to me. So could everybody take maybe 2 minutes, and we'll just go around and quickly introduce who we are and where we're from, and maybe very quickly, just where you are in the world, and then we'll find out what you're after from this as well, if that's okay. So really quick, maybe just a 1 minute intro and what you're after from the program, or why you're here. Who would like to kick off?
I can go first.
Yeah, thanks, Farah.
Yeah, so I'm Farah. I'm located in Dhaka, Bangladesh. I'm working in Light Castle Partners as a business consultant. This is my first time doing this sort of a webinar, so I'd just like to see more people in the startup and social enterprise community. So that's actually what I'm hoping to get out of it.
Yeah, great. So just scaling the number of people that are getting involved. Good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Farah. Great. Who's next?
I can go next. Hi everyone. Can you see me? Oh.
Yes, perfect, Celia.
Okay. So I'm Celia. I'm one of the founders and the managing director of She Investments. We are in Cambodia. We run business incubators and accelerators for women only. So that's that. Yeah. Am I saying what we want to get out of this program?
Yeah. What would you like to get?
So we are in the process now of scaling. So it's like just absolutely perfect timing for us, because we're scaling up in terms of number of programs and scaling geographically as well. So we're very, very keen to learn about how we can do that in the most sustainable and hopefully stress-free way.
Beautiful. It is possible. Thanks, Celia. Magic. Who'd like to go next?
Okay, I'm May from Rice Impact from Thailand. Yeah, and actually we are not on the stage of scaling, but I think it's the topic that we are talking right now for thinking forward, how we can scale, how we can develop our business model and our strategy. And apart from that, we are working to support the social innovators in Thailand and some kind of startup. So for them, like to know more how we can support and help them grow their strategy as well.
Great, excellent. So being able to spread that scaling knowledge to the cohorts, fantastic. Great.
Thank you.
Excellent. Who'd like to go next?
I can go next, if that's okay.
Oh, go for it, Junaid. Yeah. Oh, G, can you? Yeah, you might need to turn your microphone on a different way, G. Yeah, great. But yeah, Junaid, go for it.
Okay. So I'm Junaid, and I've been part of the front incubators with the different entity. It's called Takhleek. But as of March, so I'm working on an accelerator program of my own with partners in Sri Lanka, and it's a social and impact focused accelerator, but the verticals we are looking at are more in the experience side. So you have the tourism, fashion, and food, and creative. And the idea is to have more of a equitable and more of an empathetic, sharing of, in the economy, which we see less so, especially in developed world when it comes to tourism. So and the focus is more regional, starting from South Asia. Recently, I moved to Singapore, and so we are not at any place near scaling. We are actually in a place where we're trying to figure out our fundraising and all of that. But nonetheless, as I was discussing earlier, it's good to have a head start on knowledge.
Absolutely right. Yeah, good to go back to startup as well. Keep the fire burning. And yeah, great. Nice, Junaid. Thank you for joining. Fantastic. Lovely.
Thank you.
G, would you like to go? Oh, can't hear you. Is that? Ah, you're back. Hello. Can't hear you now. Yeah, microphone might not be working. Can anybody else hear G? Yeah. No, not yet. It might be something to do with the headphones. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there you go. You're back. There you are. You're on. Got you.
Oh, you can hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah, perfect.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Agnia, and I'm from Social Innovation Acceleration Program, and you can call it SIAP. So SIAP is a learning platform and accelerator for aspiring and early stage social enterprise in Indonesia. And currently, we're going to expand our program to 3 different cities in Makassar, Malang, and also Solo. And we're we already got a session with Sam like 1 month ago about scaling and replicating our incubator and accelerator. But actually, I want to learn more about the strategy, and so I'm here again. Okay.
It's good news. And you haven't got to put up with the rest of that team, hey? You can actually do the learning.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, G. Agni is one of the keenest learners I've ever met. I couldn't give her enough stuff to read. Anyway, that's great. Thank you all for coming. And Augustine, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, hi. Hi all. Sorry, I cannot share the video right now, but I hope that you can hear me fine.
Yes, great. Thanks.
Okay, hi. Hi Sam. I think I already met you as well. And maybe I'm new. I just joined this. This is my first time to join this webinar. Hi guys. I'm here to supporting SIAP and would love to explore how to scale up our impact as well. Previously, I'm in Plus, a social enterprise ecosystem platform in Indonesia. So yeah, happy to learn for today.
Yeah,
I'm
great.
here with.
Welcome back. And yeah, this is it, isn't it? We all move organizations here and there, but the learning stays with us, and we've all got to keep scaling everything we're doing to make a difference. So yeah, great to have you part of this.
Exactly.
Great. So we have 2 from Indonesia. That's great. And who else? Olia, did we have? Yeah. Welcome. Oh, I can't hear you, Olia. Don't know if you can have a play with your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Got you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I can show the video too because the poor connection here, Sam.
Quite all right.
So I'm Aulia. I'm working with Instellar. I work especially in the incubation program. So we are incubator and also accelerator for social enterprise in Indonesia. And now I'm here to explore the opportunity to learn about replication and replicate incubation program of Instellar to the wider area in Indonesia.
Excellent. Very good. Yeah. Good to hear you, Olivia. Fantastic. And welcome. That's 3 from Indonesia, and that's good news because it's such a big place. So fantastic. The more of you, the better. Fantastic. Yeah, great. Right. Thank you, everybody. Fantastic. So, okay, good to have you all here. We'll try and keep this briefer than other sessions because we haven't got the content to run through. But just from a quick show of hands, let's have a look. Maybe we'll do it in the chat. How many folks managed to watch the webinar already before coming to the seminar? And don't worry if you haven't watched it already. It was my fault for uploading it late as well. I get poor marks for that. So maybe if you could type a yes in the chat if you have watched the webinar so far, maybe something like that, just to give us a quick sense. rather than going around. And I'll just do a quick collation. If you haven't, then you can access it on the YouTube and our channel. Hopefully everybody's accessing Slack okay. And there is a backup as well in the Google Drive. Yeah, if time to add, if you can add in the chat group there. I'm just going to type there first. Gotcha. Thanks, Celia. Fantastic. Good news. Well, if there are any problems with getting access to it, just let me know via Slack. Hopefully the Slack channel is the way we can communicate, and we'll get that up. And again, any feedback as well. I'm conscious that I droned on at you for about 50 minutes on that webinar. So if I can keep them shorter, then I will. And we'll be joined in the next webinars by Deepak from Village Capital, who will be walking us through some of their viral system for making sure that we get everything set up really, really well. So if anybody's already using that, then it'll be a good refresh and a recap, but it'll be a nice in-depth look at how to use viral, which was partly their inspiration from NASA and all of that, if you remember it from Singapore. We'll then be joined by Carlos from the Global Entrepreneurship Network with some of the later webinars. And I want to make sure that we all know as well that for the webinars, we are completely in control of that content. We've sketched out a whole load of stuff for you that we'll be filming week after week. So we're going to do filming the day after the seminars. So if there's anything that you are really wanting us to cover or would like some more depth on, then raise it in the seminar, and then we can integrate it, if we can, to the webinar as well. So we want to make sure it's responsive, not just in the seminars, but in the webinars as well. So just to make that offer. Okay, great. So there's a few people who have watched it, and that's okay, fine. So right then, to get going then. So having watched the webinar, and this one is before you scale. So it was raising some of the things that we've talked about with folks that I've already engaged with, Celia, Agnia, and the SIAT team, around mainly those three different things were the focal point. Your drivers for scaling, so that you know what you're really trying to achieve, and making sure you've just got that clear in amongst your teams, and that you've got messaging that you can give to stakeholders, but also to be checking on and measuring. Your scaling pathway and knowing which way you're going to go, and making some sort of choices that you can test and explore and go in different ways. And then the third one was the replication readiness test, which is also useful to check not just whether you're replication ready, but ask some really good questions in terms of your organizational readiness for scaling, and gives you some focal points to work on. So from any of that, or from anything else that's going on for you right now, what would people like to get out of today? Is there anything in particular out of that menu of things in the webinar, or anything that came up in the webinar that specifically interested you to talk about and apply to your situation? Anything specific? Everybody's too polite. We'll talk about everything, shall we? Okay, if everybody's up for it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that kind of aroused curiosity for me was, you talked about when to scale, I think, and that was something that got me thinking about a lot of things. And I was just thinking, how much of different elements have to be in tandem to be at the right point? You talk about whether the impact, so if impact side of your model is scalable, but the financial viability of it is not, how do you strike that balance in terms of, not because, I mean, the last thing you would want is that you get into scaling your program and then you realize, oh, you don't have the resources for it or something or the other. But obviously you can't just always be waiting to see, because it'll never be that perfect balance, right? So what has been your experience? What are the key foundation things that you feel that enable you to be at a place that, okay, now you're like, okay, maybe it's the financial viability side of it, whether it's the right resources. Yeah, so just curious to know more about that.
Yeah, nice, good question, really good. Yeah, when's the right time to scale? And whether you're impact ready or finance ready. Great question. Any others, or any seconds for Junaid as a question to kick off with? Any other burning issues?
Maybe building from the previous questions, I'm also curious about how do we define enough traction to scale? I mean, is that the grant, the number of project grants, or the number of strategic projects that we have to build, or the number of let's say the social enterprise that we help? I mean, yeah, how do we define enough tractions?
Yeah.
So we can say that we are ready to scale.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's
and,
it.
And just one little addition to that, and the reason I think so, usually with scale, and I would just speak for Pakistan, and I'm sure similar economies have similar situation, that when you have more of a personnel driven workforce and like work environment where individuals matter more than the processes, usually scaling up is something people are reluctant to do, because you can't scale individuals, right? So if someone is good at one thing and you're not a process driven kind of a setup, then that means the person, he can't be in so many places, or she can't be in so many places at the same time. So usually there is a lot of reluctance around that. So that's another reason, and I'm sure that'll be similar for a lot of the ecosystems that we have in frontier incubators. And that's why scaling kind of becomes a bit of a taboo at times as well. So that's another thing, kind of, to add on to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, our different models have a huge impact on how easy it is to scale, whether investors are up for putting money in or not, whether there's capital involved, human resource, or whether we just got some tech solution that you can press a button and away we go. Yeah, it's much easier to raise money for the tech stuff nowadays than those more human intensive. No, but that's good. Really good questions. Anybody else want to add something at this point? We can come back and do another round of, I'm sure we'll get deeper. Okay, cool. So those are good questions to kick off with in that case. Right, so the first part of that then was from Junaid, which was around really when do you know that you're ready in terms of that, the balance between whether you're impact ready and your impact's going really well, and therefore it's a good idea to get that scaling, but maybe the finance doesn't stack up so much yet. Before I go ahead and say what I want to say, has anybody got any opinions on that? Anybody got any reactions or any thoughts? Or maybe you've had that sort of debate in your teams as well. Oh yeah, okay, I'll give my opinion. So when you can cut me off at any point, put your hat in the ring and tell me to shut up, but add your experience at any point, otherwise I'll just talk. So yeah, this is the thing, isn't it? That we are going to see some pretty, when you read a lot of the literature on scaling, it all sounds very logical. It all sounds very intentional and very intended, that everything must be, the box is ticked and you've got to be exactly at the right spot before you scale. And that's kind of what the viral framework from Village Capital is all about, really solid assessment. Same with that social franchising manual and the assessments that are in there. Really hard questions that you can ask of yourself to make sure that you are improving your organization. But I think for the reality for us all, and I think this is probably true for you, Celia, and your guys, is that demand can exceed your supply, or can exceed where you're at and come at you quicker than maybe you're ready for, and you have to react and to meet that demand and go quicker than maybe you're ready for. And that would be showing that your impact side is really ready. but then the finance or building the rest of the organization to follow on behind that, that becomes your scaling task, and making sure that you're building your capacity to keep up with what everybody else around the world wants you to be doing. And you only have, apparently there are 24 hours in the day. I think entrepreneurs stretch that to about 26 at least. So until we can shape time, we have to get more efficient and better at running our organizations, and get people to invest those capacity dollars in giving us extra teams, extra people to be able to do what we need to do. Otherwise, in catching up and in making sure that our finance model or that our team capacity can catch up with the impact side, that's where burnout's going to come in the scaling process, because scaling an organization takes more resources than you've currently got. If you are just running your current organization and current operation and trying to scale it at the same time, you've only got 18 months, I reckon, maybe a little bit more, before you start really feeling that that startup burnout again. So it's a really, really tricky moment that if your finance model is stacking up but your impact isn't, that's a different equation. It sounds like you've maybe got a really cracking product that's able to make money, and that's maybe a little bit easier if you are making enough money from it. You maybe are starting to build reserves enough to invest in attending to getting the quality up. And that's some of the Social Enterprise Academy story, actually, is in sort of years 3 to 6. Years 1 to 3 for us were very much building the product, testing, trying to get the right fit. And after 3 years, we'd got a really good product suite and some really good market fit. And we were starting to win some bigger contracts that allowed us to get into new regions. So those big contracts, which were financially well set up and made sure we'd got a healthy amount of money, those allowed us to build some reserves, which then enabled us to really focus on the quality side and get that sort of back up to scratch, if you like. Not that it had dipped too much, but so making sure you've got good finance built in is certainly an easier route than if you're getting too much demand and not enough cash. I think this is where we have to be strong with our stakeholders to make sure that we are getting enough money in the door. Do any of those scenarios sound familiar to folks that are going through it right now? And do you want to share any of your experience? I'm not going to say anything for about 2 minutes, so somebody else better talk.
I think for us, like, we've definitely waited until there's the demand that justifies it, but we have waited to, like, for funding. So I pitched for funding or investment specifically to help us scale, and we ended up getting that from a firm who essentially will invest to help you to scale if you can't afford to take the risk yourself. So it just matched really, really well. But because I just, like, we just don't have, like, the leftover, like, capital ourselves to invest into it, unfortunately. But in saying that, like, getting the funding for infrastructure and stuff was one thing, but then, like, now we're kind of like, okay, we have to figure out how to do this sustainably and how to train people, and human resources are probably, like, the hardest part of it for us, and processes. Like someone was saying before about, like, you know, we're all kind of startups and we don't necessarily have, like, the processes in place that, like, larger organizations have. So I think for us, that's probably the human resources side of it, and then processes are, like, the most difficult for us, which we're trying to figure out now, which is exactly why, like, we're in this program. So yeah. I think, and the dedication, particularly, like, our overheads, like me spending time on this, I'm not costed into things. So, like, our leadership team, it's, like, such a huge cost for us to manage expansion. So I think, like, I'm focusing really hard on making sure we get heaps and heaps of work in on the other side, so that, like, we can actually justify our leadership team spending so much time on this, because we're the most expensive, and like, it just makes the overhead so high for the expansion costs. So like it's hard when it comes to funding and stuff. It's hard. I think it's one of those things like I don't really know if we're ready for it or not, but we're also just like diving in and yeah. So it's a risk, but
yeah, meeting demand. That's awesome, Celia. Thank you. That's fantastic. And I think you're making exactly the right move, that getting those extra capacity funds, it sounds like you may even need even more in backfilling. Backfilling is a concept that I became very aware of in all of that if you've got your existing model, making sure that is working is one part of your job. And I think to Junaid's point, keeping that viable for itself, and not having to necessarily cover the costs of scaling. It's a separate thing. So bringing in other money to help you scale. But while you're doing that, until you've backfilled the human capacity to run your existing model without you, then that's the tension where you're running the existing model and getting money and becoming replication ready for scaling. And then the third thing is then actually scaling and doing the work of growing the business. So you've got kind of three tasks: running the business, becoming replication ready, and then actually scaling. And so whilst those three are all on you as founders or you as people that are trying to do the scaling, that's going to be a tough moment. And it took us, I mean, how long does it take to recruit in your different markets? Sometimes it takes us like 3, 4, 5, 6 months before somebody's in post. But from the moment you make a decision of, we need somebody doing this, to going through recruitment, finding the right person, then maybe finishing a job and joining you, and then onboarding them, and then actually then taking the strain that you've been carrying, that can be a window of time. So getting ahead of that and making sure that you are able to have the team around you is crucial. But then it's all on you to raise the finance again. So it's the work never goes away, right? It's a good job we're motivated. But yeah, very typical kind of stuff. Celia, has anybody got anything else to add on that? I'm going to go quiet for 60 seconds again, see if anybody wants to add. Maybe G and CAP, were you guys ready? Were you impact ready, finance ready for scaling? What would be your addition? What do you think? Oh, can you play with your mic again? G, sorry. There you go. Not quite. No.
Can you hear me?
There we are. Got you. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, for this year, yeah, because we're fully supported by British Council from the DICE program. So yeah, we are ready for scaling and replicating our bootcamp, especially to 3 other cities. But actually, because we are also planning to expand our bootcamp, and also SIAP is creating a license package. We're trying to find another funding for next year, and we're currently trying to apply for another round of funding from BBS, the bank, so we can scale our program to other cities as well. But the main challenges for us is really to find the right funding and also the right program to support our activities. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Again, I think in CAP's case, it's a really great example of, you've been running an accelerator for a couple of years. You're proving out the product, and it's working. And on its own, it's financially viable to run the direct costs of that. You need to scale in order to cover your full staff costs, and that's part of it. So having an efficient model for scaling is really key. So having the licensing part of what you do is a great test of whether that's going to work to be able to scale into new places. But as you say, having a big contract win, like the British Council contract for you guys, that gives you funds to make sure you can really test and that you can deliver in a different model. So at the minute, you've got 2 different models in play, a funded or paid for model with the British Council example, paying for, is it four different rollouts, 4 or 5 cities, something like that? 3. Yeah, so three tests, and then also looking at the licensing side of it as well for a longer term, more sustainable play as well. So it's good. It's really good to have those two different things that gives you the quick cash flow to make sure that it's working, but also then testing your longer term product. So I think sort of circling back to Junaid's point, and then we'll move to the sort of second question as well. I think knowing that it's good enough is often one of those tricks of actually this is good enough. We're going to take it to market and let's see if we can make it work. And as you're going through the journey of scaling, you can raise additional funds that helps you sort of go back and slightly improve the impact quality, just to make sure that it really is ready for the new situations you come to, because sometimes what you've got in one location isn't exactly what you need for the next location anyway. So if we become too hung up, then we're just going to sort of stall sometimes. So I think scaling is a very entrepreneurial activity, and often I think to slightly to Celia's point, we have that internal tension, as many organizations do, of the business development folks racing ahead and trying to create new opportunities and building that scaling journey, and then the quality folks, the folks that are trying to sort of mop up behind, if you like, and make sure it all hangs together and that it's neat and tidy, and that the quality is there, the impact is there. So really good if you've got that balance in your team that can keep everybody healthy. To the sort of the second question, which is like, how do we define whether we've got enough traction for scaling as well, whether there's enough market demand or is it really scalable? Again, I think that comes down to evidencing your existing model and your take up in terms of what you're doing at the moment. I know that before we scaled internationally, we'd been running for how long? This must have been 6-7 years before we started getting that invitation. And the invitation that was coming was based on the fact that we had a viable business, that we were getting year on year increasing demands, good cohort retention. The product was good as well. People enjoyed the quality of it and could see that was going to work in other locations. So we had good evidence bank. We'd been evidencing it and doing independent assessment of our work every 3 years. So every 3 years we'd get the University of Glasgow and the Training, Education and Research Unit to come and have a good look at what we do. So building that bank of evidence and knowledge showed that we had good traction in one market, but again, we had no traction in any other global territory at all. And for us, it was then about raising funds to go and test. And that's partly where that strategic driver question comes from, is the Social Enterprise Academy board were very concerned that we didn't take our eye off the ball of our domestic market. So we'd been set up to do one thing, and that was to support social enterprise in Scotland and people who are working for social change. So the idea of going into other markets was potentially a distraction. Doing international stuff could be seen as being the exotic bit, and going into all sorts of different countries. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't being taken away from making sure that central traction that we secured in Scotland wasn't going to go away. So that was partly why we, again, in terms of capacity, started to split the business in terms of who's working on which bit, and making sure that somebody had their real eye on the ball, making sure that the domestic operation, whatever you're currently running, doesn't drop down, and that you maintain the traction and that you maintain the income streams that are coming from those existing activities. So in terms of what's enough traction to be able to scale, that's a very relative thing based on your model. So if you're trying to get 20 to 40 people, or say 20 people, or whether it's 40 people onto a cohort, and you're only getting 7, then your own metrics are going to tell you that that's not good enough. If you're getting more like 80 to 90% capacity filled, and those people are going all the way through it and they're coming out the other end, then you've got some metrics that are maybe better, saying actually this is going to stack up. And if funders are able to pay for that, or if your model is starting to work in terms of making investments and creating investable organizations, or whatever the way that you are designing your operation, your own metrics will start to tell you, actually, you know, we've got something here that's really gonna work. So anybody disagree with any of that, or anybody want to throw their hat in the ring and yeah, share their experience? I'm not going to talk for at least 30 seconds. Maybe something from the Instella experience, Sylvia. Instella's been around for a long time, eh? In Indonesia.
Yeah, not really long. It's have established it in last year actually, but the program is running for 3 years. But we focus on the early stage, but not not for the idea stage. So maybe that's our homework to create a pre-incubation for to cater many many aspiring social entrepreneur here to establish their own enterprise, I think.
Yes, right. So you think actually for you to scale, you need more people sort of preloading those cohorts. Yeah. So if you can develop something to create more ideas that are then you can then use your existing incubator for. Has anybody else got that problem? Has anybody else got the issue of needing to stimulate more demand ahead of your current product, or have you got enough people joining your cohorts at the moment when you're working with them?
I think for us, like we have a really, really strong network in Phnom Penh. We don't find it hard to fill cohorts here, but we're scaling to new provinces. And so we don't yet know whether we're going to get the same kind of number of applications in provinces or not. It may be a very different story out there. So that's definitely a risk for us.
Yeah, yeah. How many people do you work with on your cohorts, Celia, usually?
10 to 15.
So yeah, nice. So a good small enough group that it's maybe viable in some of those more remote locations or in different locations, but strong enough that it will provide good support for the folks that are on the cohort. Yeah, that's a really good number. Some places the cohort numbers are huge. Is anybody recruiting cohorts of 20 plus? It's on the call at the moment.
Yeah, we are about 20 to 25 per cohort.
Yeah, cool. Again, solid numbers. If if a few people drop off, you've still got late teens and that's a really good zone to be working in. But can be trickier in rural areas as well to sustain that. But yeah, great, cool. Anybody 40 plus? No, it's good. Thank God. The learning drops off over 20. I find anyway. We're doing work with Magic in Malaysia at the for the government backed Idea Accelerator and Main Social Enterprise Bootcamp, and those cohorts can be like 60 people or so, and that's just epic. And to sustain that over like 6 to 12 weeks is really tough, but it gives you a different energy. But Agnia, how big were CEAP cohorts? And do you have that same issue of enough people coming in the front end with ideas that are ready to support? Oh, microphone again, sorry.
Now, can you hear me?
Got you. Yep, that's it.
Oh, yeah, the problem is because this cohort, where the program is for free. So basically, there are lots of participants trying to be in our program. So it is about 170 for each series, but we are but we are sorting it to 30 participants per cohort. But the main challenges is if we are going to run another boot camp for next year, or maybe for another cohort in the same city, is it possible for us to charge for a certain fee that we're not I don't know whether it's going to work or not. Yeah, that's our main challenge.
Yes, exactly. At least you've got a few different cities you could test that. Do a bit of an A/B test, charge in one city and not in another, and see how that works, and see what reaction you get. No, that's it. And in terms of those, the different approaches, as I think, as Celia, as you said, that testing in a new area where you haven't had traction already, and same for you, Agnia, you're moving into new places. Celia, are you planning on having staff members or like an agent or somebody recruited to work for you to help do that local recruitment? Agnia, I think you've got slightly different plans for those different areas, and you've got different links anyway, but can we say a little bit to the capacity side, having the right resource to help you to access those new cohorts, new people? What are some of the ideas that you guys have got so far?
Yeah, so we've decided to hire 2 people per province. One is like the kind of project coordinator and facilitator of workshops and programs, and one is like an assistant. But we also want to kind of launch a new program which is around training contracted facilitators, so that we can be a lot more purposeful about hiring people who can just be contracted and brought in and out depending on the program, because we really don't want to just keep like hiring people, which is what we've been doing lately. And it's also like a risk management thing, so we don't want to go and like have teams, like bigger teams in each province, and we also don't want to have things like office leases in provinces, because like just like all of the legalities behind it, all of the paperwork, it's just a nightmare. So we're like trying to get kind of 2 people per province who can work from like co-working spaces or office share situations, who can come to Phnom Penh regularly, and we can go there and like we can, you know, train them, but then also like train other people up to be contractors in Phnom Penh and other provinces, and maybe focusing in Phnom Penh and people who are willing to travel. But definitely the people in the provinces will be responsible for like building their networks there, and we're hiring people from those provinces rather than hiring people from Phnom Penh to go and live in those provinces, so they can kind of know the area and tap into the networks a bit. And we're really like relying on our brand and stuff, but we've chosen particular provinces like based on a few things, but they're all kind of like urban centers. So they're all definitely like not cities, but they're places where, you know, there's more businesses, but there's also places that like we know a lot of our participants already travel from to come to Phnom Penh for our workshops. So we know that there is some level of demand there, and we had those women also, like our alumni in those provinces, could be like potential mentors or facilitators themselves. So it's kind of based on those things as well.
Perfect. Fantastic example, Sia. There you go. So much in that. The traction element, not only you've got traction in your existing market, but you can spot the other markets because they're coming to you already. It's fantastic. It's also showcasing how to go and find people who can join your team, again, from the reaction you're already getting in terms of traction. Yeah, just a magic answer. And having those local teams is so crucial, hey? That same with our model, when we were replicating just within, say, Scotland, having people who are based up in the Highlands and Islands, the relationships that they have, the community development approach to marketing and sales, if you like, is so key. But you've got people who are good at spotting opportunities, but have got those local connections, so that you can really be sure that they're the right opportunities that are being created. You haven't just got some salesperson trying to sell whatever it is to the product, to the people, saying this is good for you, we're going to ram it down your throats, you must have this. It's actually a more nuanced kind of way of building a community and building a cohort. And I think the other thing that your example raises is, going back to the webinar, the scaling pathways. kind of all those different options for how you scale, how you grow. What you've just articulated is you're growing your organization, but you're being really careful about your overheads and sort of optimizing those central costs. And whilst it's still one organization, you're building in the other approach of building a network rather than just having staff everywhere doing what you need to do. So blending those two models is kind of giving you that a different flavor of what you're building and keeping your overheads down at the same time. So hopefully you'll be building that resilience of both an organization and a network. That's two different tasks. But as you described, if you've got a fairly light situation like we had in the Highlands, you can travel, get those people to come together and keep the team sort of, or that wider distributed network or team together. But the challenge is then making sure that everybody stays value-based, stays connected, and stays aligned as a group of people under your brand. So yeah, great example. Has anybody else got anything to add on that? Have you seen other examples similar to that in terms of opening up new geographies, new places, or in watching the webinar, looking at the different models or scaling pathways in what we're talking about? We've just been talking about growing organization and network. Did anything resonate there for anybody else in terms of what might be suitable for your model of scaling? Maybe Farah or May. Any thoughts on anything you've been hearing so far?
So in regards to scaling, I actually agree. I think in many instances when we are in need of people, we have this tendency to just scale, just hire, just scale. But I think doing it in an organized and planned manner, maybe having a forecast of how many people you need, how much talent you need, and then first hiring or first scaling below that forecast to see if your method is going right. Maybe that would be my preferred way of doing it.
Yeah, cool. And it sounds like you're more intentional in terms of your just detail and making sure that you're ready and that everything's in place. That's good.
Yeah.
Good way.
Yeah. So the best piece of advice I've heard a few weeks back was hire slow and fire fast. So hiring or taking in resources slowly and maybe doing it below forecast at first and then reaching full capacity just to see if your method is putting in the right resources for your organization.
Yeah. Cool. And I think this is it, and making sure we've got the right capacity to be able to do that, evidencing and checking that we can do it. Absolutely crucial, being able to communicate all of that in proposals and documents and so on. And I know that, again, for me, you'll all be working with your different boards as well and making sure that that they're happy and they've got the evidence and information they need. Part of really having your definition of what it is you're scaling, your understanding of your domestic market and understanding those drivers as well, that gives you your routine information that makes sure your boards are staying aligned with what you're trying to do. I know that for us, making sure that them knowing that we weren't taking our eye off the ball in terms of the quality was really key, that if we are scaling to other areas, we're having good impact in those areas, but also we're learning in return, and that we're feeding stuff back into our central organization was key as well. So being really intentional about it and not just responding too much to demand, really good practice, definitely. I'm just conscious of time, so we'll probably go on for another 10-15 minutes if folks have got stuff they want to talk about. I have a question around the replication readiness assessment. Has anybody had a chance to have a look at that or even have a go at it and get any results from doing that? No worries if not yet. I'm just going to flash it up on the screen if I can, and then we can have a quick conversation about that. Because again, just to make sure we are covering those sort of topics. Where are we? Just going to share my screen. So you can refer to the version that's on the slides, hopefully. Here we are. So the various things that we were covering in the webinar. So the strategic drivers, being really clear on what those are, was the first task. Looking at your different pathways and being super clear on which model. And later in the webinar series, I'm hoping to have a couple of examples of some of these different approaches. And I'll come back to that in a second. But just to talk about quickly just now, the replication readiness element, when you do get a chance to do this, if you're doing this little test, just take each of these questions, and the questions are more clearly articulated in that social franchising manual from Social Enterprise UK, which is in your reading list there. It's a really useful test to do with your teams. If you stick the numbers 1 to 10 along the side, and then go through each of these questions, it just sometimes can tune you into the things that you need to do to improve your score. If you give yourself a mark of 1 out of 10 for each of these elements, you can then score yourself really, really clearly, and do this little process of just where are we now, a usual kind of SWOT analysis. And then for each element of that gives you your things you need to go and work on. And I know, Agnia, we've done that with CAP. And I don't know if you guys have referred to that since, or if you want to say anything about that process, or whether that checklist is being worked on or not at the moment. Do you want to add anything at this point? Okay, no, that's good. But I think in terms of many of the questions that we're asking, so things like how do we know we've got enough traction, all that sort of stuff, those questions are exactly there in the readiness assessment. Not just the end users and the cohort, but potential people to replicate with, or networks in other places, and also like policymakers as well. I think that's one of the big elements of our work, is that unless we've got funders behind us, unless we've got policymakers, stakeholders helping to build those ecosystems by putting the relevant amount of money in, then we're going to be drying up in terms of fundable cohorts, if you like, and making sure that we've got a good deal flow from the stakeholder side is really crucial as well. So attending to our profiles with stakeholders and making sure they see the value of investing in the ecosystem is still really good use of your time and of your money as well. Not just building your cohorts or your on the ground market, but recognizing your market of stakeholders as well. So that's really crucial activity. How many folks are doing that side of it as well? Are you attending to your stakeholders and building your markets as well? Anyone want to add anything on that? It's good. I assume you're all working nicely on your stakeholders in that case. That's good. Hyper proficient teams. And then, so again, it's really worth having a go at that assessment. Agnia, it'd be really interesting actually to look at CAP's progress and as you go in terms of the work we did in more detail and checking, because I'll share later in the webinars an in-depth look at the Social Enterprise Academy's kind of checklist for replication readiness. And again, we've kind of got that, just a color grading of, on all of those different areas that we had to sort of sort out, how ready were we to scale, and we were not ready at all at the beginning. And then even now, when new staff join us, they'll say, oh, that's not finished. And we say, yeah, not finished, but it's good enough. And we've got to keep improving it. And I'm blown away by it. Even like 6 years down the track, we've, you wouldn't believe the wealth of stuff that we've got. It's ridiculous. There's so many projects, all those different people contributing over time, creating better and better and better documents. But even so, you'll come up against something and someone will say, oh, have you just got this? And you go, oh, no, I haven't got that. Would you like that? Yeah, okay, we'll go and make that. So I'm blown away. But yeah, Agnes, I don't know if you've made any progress on some of the things that we picked out with CAP. Don't worry if you haven't. You've got a lot to do in running all your cohorts and your projects. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, especially for about the replication readiness. Actually, there are some points that we are still have to improve a lot, like especially for the operation systems and also the procedures in place. So we have to create our blueprint, and it is not ready yet for now. But currently, we already revamped. We are revamping our curriculum, and we already embedded the impact management framework to the whole curriculum. So that's mainly our focus now, and we are trying to adapt the curriculum to the local to the participants to what the local participants need. We're also reducing the curriculum, especially for the curriculum that is focusing on focusing about startups. So because most of the participants is a conventional business, so what we're doing is really revamping the curriculum based on their needs. That is really the main challenge also. And the second one is the duplicable. Are we go? Is the bootcamp ready to replicate it locally? And we are trying to build the community in each cities, and we're creating local events also, because we already got the local associate that we are partnering with.
Yeah.
So the progress.
Excellent. Good progress. So again, in terms of your energy and amount of time you have to work on it, you're very focused on making sure the curriculum's good enough and making sure you've got the people to deliver it in those new places as you're testing. Not spending too much time on some of the other stuff in terms of having a very lean setup. So that's really great. You're paying attention to your customers and making sure you've got the capacity to deliver. And similar to She, you've got a just more distributed network. So finding agents in those places to be able to do your work and to help you to recruit locally. So yeah, perfect. And two great examples of replicating once you've had a couple of years of traction and that your curriculum is just about good enough so that you can just perfect it and get it shipped out. Yeah, great examples. Cool. So I think that the real thing for that for me is that you can spend a lot of time trying to become ready, but actually just giving it a good test is part of what we have to do as entrepreneurial support organizations. We have to tap our inner entrepreneurs as well, make sure that we're very lean in doing those tests. Eventually the rest needs to catch up, absolutely. And in the next webinar, we'll be talking about the design of how we can design our organizations to make sure we've got the right fit to achieve some of these different models for growth. For example, instead of intellectual property protection, we can be designing our organizations that protect ourselves from folks that would take our IP and use it against us and compete in the marketplace as well. So we'll be looking at elements of design that can help with that. But certainly that first activity, making sure you've got good market testing going on, is a really good use of your time and your resource and keeping yourselves healthy whilst you scale. Really, really good. And I think that just brings us back to the scaling pathways conversation. So I'm interested to know, so we've talked a little bit about the She model and the CAP model there. CAP looking at licensing model, but also with some major funded stuff. She having won some major funding to roll out, not just with staff members, but with a network of associates or freelancers. And there's a whole range of scaling pathways to look at. And I often go back and reflect on that as just making sure we're aware of what are the options for scaling. We don't have to scale necessarily in the way that we have been doing, or that we think we might be able to. Looking at the different models is really, really key. So for example, in your ecosystems, how many people have delivered something as part of a consortium with other ecosystem players so far? Have you bid together to win other contracts as a way of growing? Has anybody done that yet? Have there been contracts to win? Any partnerships, or have you worked together to win funds with another organization? Maybe May or Mariska, anything from your experience on that? Working with other organizations in strategic partnerships or consortia?
Experience working with the foundation that want us to we develop a program for change maker together, but I'm not sure if that's kind of scaling the impact. But yeah, we have some kind of partnership to develop some service together.
Yeah, great. That's a good start. And Mariska, yes, you're going to add something as well.
Yeah, most of our or most of my experience in Plus is mostly based on contracts, and yeah, we're kind of developing a strategic partnership, but it's more a long-term relationship based first, instead of directly linked to the contract. Like for example, with the British councils, maybe it's not. First, it's research, and then the next will be DICE program, just like in SIAP. But way before that, we've been developing the relationship like 1 year or 1 year before we got the contracts. I'm not sure if it can be called as a strategic partnership, but it's more like relationship building in a way that hopefully can lead to a contract in the not in the near time, but it's more like in a mid-term or long-term purpose.
Yeah, exactly right. And two great examples that I think that as routes to scale, making sure you have good relationships with other organizations in the ecosystem long term is, again, fundamental to when the moment comes when you have to build a partnership to maybe put in a bid for funds, or to, even better, win a government contract or procurement from an organization that is wanting to procure your services. Having those partnerships, having those relationships that are just either at a first level aware of what you do and you're friendly, to at a second level maybe working together on something where there's no money changing hands or what have you, but you're both influencing policymakers, for example, and good strong allies, to a third level where you're actually becoming delivery partners, and maybe you start putting an MOU in place or a partnership agreement where you can bid for work that helps you to become more sustainable. All of those levels of building your partnerships are really, really key. So any of your work that you're doing now in just that first level of building alliances and making sure you're just good ecosystem partners, those are all crucial sort of foundational steps for scaling and helping you to win bigger and bigger contracts. In our experience as well, having some of those, the ecosystem players, there are maybe 7 or 8 key social enterprise ecosystem players back, say, 10 years ago in Scotland, who would meet fairly regularly, and we would all be working on slightly different parts of the puzzle. And then and we were all in sort of a strategic partnership with Scottish Government, each doing their own piece of work around business support or acceleration or fund distribution. And when the government came under pressure to procure and do more social procurement, and make sure this stuff wasn't just done in isolated chunks, but to put out a tender to supply the services to the sector. We then were under threat from, for example, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and some of the big accountancy companies wanted to try and win those contracts to support the cohorts that we'd been supporting. So as a sector, having those relationships in place was really key, that we could formulate a strong consortium who could bid for that work. So I think in terms of your scaling pathways, you're all developing your cohorts, you're all developing your models. If in your ecosystems, those sort of contracts could be coming up, making sure you've got your alliances that you can shape up into a business development pitch together could be a really key thing. So, and that may be more responsive than planned. And I think that comes all the way back to Junaid's point right at the beginning, in looking at, are you impact ready or are you finance ready? Sometimes these things happen to us and we just have to be able to go. So making sure you've got some of these practices in place beforehand is really, really key. And that there is maybe no single model of scaling, that you might have to have a couple of different models on the go at the same time. Maybe building your existing organization, building a delivery network as well, but also looking at strategic partnerships or consortia to go and win certain bids and bring yourself in other income streams at the same time. A couple of those other options on the screen there, just before we're finishing, licensing content in, licensing content out. I think CAP is an example of starting to license out your content, that you've got a model that you can hopefully be putting in the hands of other people to start them scaling in their own areas, being part of your license network. I know a lot of people that we work with are licensing in our content in order to help them to jump ahead and to start running. They can suddenly use our hundreds of programs and activities, and they leverage off our tech systems and so on. So those two different ways of scaling by using something, people that use Impact Hub brand, for example, maybe licensing in that brand and some of the intel and the knowledge. And so again, for your model, looking for people who might license in your model means that you can license it out. And another really interesting route for us to all just make sure we're aware of as well, mergers and acquisitions. I don't know if any of you've seen any mergers in your ecosystems, but I know that in the South African context, for example, Lifeco Unlimited was a merger that happened between Unlimited and Lifeco, and that allowed them to grow. And I'll drop you a link to some, again, just some YouTube short videos that speak to that as an example. A little bit more rare, but again, really fascinating, where you've got maybe a couple of organizations that separately are doing okay, but together can amplify a lot of what they're doing, and again, reach more people and have a stronger resource as well. So lots of different routes, but just to say that even if you've got, and again, coming back to that original question that Junaid raised, even if you think you've got your one model and that model is working and it's impactful and financially viable, staying alive to different models and different options is really, really key. And having those tests of, are we optimizing what we're doing, or are we maximizing our core product? And is diversification, is taking on one of these other pathways going to distract us too much, or is it going to bring in essential resource that helps us to strengthen our capacity? To Celia's point, making sure we've got that really strong team that's able to deliver the ambitions of what we've got, may mean taking on a slightly different path that makes us more financially viable in our core in order for us to do other things. So the example of Plus and CAP in Indonesia taking on the British Council contract, that's pretty well aligned with what you want to achieve anyway. That's letting you do market testing whilst supporting your core capacity. So keeping a few of those coming in is a great strategy, but then also exploring your licensing model at the same time is again part of keeping you healthy, keeping you viable, but isn't too distracting from what you're doing. If you start having to run co-working spaces and incubators in a different way, that could be diversification, and it's definitely a distraction from maybe what you're doing at the heart of it. So yeah, worth staying alive to some of those. Has anybody got any final points they would like to raise? I'm very conscious of time. I know we started a little bit late, but any thoughts that are coming out for people? And maybe if you do a quick round so everybody gets a chance to speak. What are your main reflections on what we've been talking about today? Any key aha moments or key takeaways just from having this conversation? Who'd like to start?
Yeah, for me, in our team, we have been talking about the strategic partnerships and how to scale our staff member because we have a burden with workloads and lots of things going on that we still struggle how to build more capacity to the new member and yeah, lots of things about our business part and listening to what you guys have done today helped me crystal clear a lot about our situation. So I may have more questions in the next session.
Yeah, that's great. Good and perfect. That's why we can keep coming back together in the space between sessions. If stuff's coming up and you're starting to have more questions or more things you want to talk about, that's great. Raise them next time. But that's really good. It's good to hear we're still talking in the right zone, and building strategic partnerships I think is a good thing to be doing, good practice at any stage. Great. Thank you, May. Anybody else? Is it reinforcing what you're currently doing, or does anybody feel like, heck, we're doing completely the wrong things? Aurelia, Farah, Mariska, maybe?
Hi, Sam. Thank you so much for sharing for today. I think the mantra that I got, or the aha moment for me, is managing energy. And managing energy, basically, managing our team basically is managing the energy of all the people involved during the scaling up process. And I think it's very important for us to being mindful about the iteration process or trying many different models. Since basically we're kind of young in here, maybe 3 years until 3 years for CF, or maybe 5 years for installers. And I think this mantra maybe can help us to define or discern whether it distract us or can lead us to or closer can lead us closer to our scale up strategy. Yeah, thank you so much, Sam.
Yeah, that's good. Staying alive, keeping testing as we're going. I think that's the reality of it, is we create opportunities to test stuff, and once it's working, we can have a go at it. But the pace of this we'll be talking about in a later webinar as well, because it takes time to generate these opportunities, run the cohorts well, see if it's working, then scale. It's not an overnight tech thing that you can switch it on and it seems to grow just like that. It takes time. So yeah, thanks. It's good to hear that. Yeah, there's at least awareness of different models that you can be testing as you go. So yeah, so thanks, Mariska. Great.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any aha moments? Or is it all stuff you've heard before?
So I think definitely the part you talked about of building relationship with your peers essentially, and having that foresight that when some of the bigger players come in, you are kind of leveraging each other's strength, and kind of can co-pitch and all of that. So that's something of a kind of an aha moment there, because a lot of time I think, especially when you're starting out something new, and with what we are doing right now, it kind of did help us as well, although we're not anywhere close to raising funding right now. But one of our co-founder actually runs a co-working space. So in our conversation, just a standalone accelerator program didn't resonate that well, or people didn't make sense of it, but the physical presence kind of added to the credentials in some way, that okay, this is not just something up in the air. It actually has I mean, as much of it's a mindset thing, but I think definitely that leveraging the other, persons or other entities' strength kind of helps the pitch as well.
Yeah, great. Good one, Junaid. And that can start from today as well. That's great, from even in earlier stages of startup, making sure you're known and have got those relationships. Great, very good. Definitely a key part of the journey. Anyone else? Farah, Aulia, anything going on for you guys?
I think for me, just keeping track of, I think focusing energy is important, but for just keeping track of where you are, not overestimating your resources, and then scaling accordingly so that you're not burning cash, or you're not going too fast. I think for me, and where I am, that's, and I think we all agreed on that as well. So we can often entrepreneurship, you hear, go fast, go hard. We also have to keep in mind where you are.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. You're breaking up a little bit, but from what I heard is, and I can definitely take away, and I'm definitely going to integrate into the next webinar as well, is what you were describing there is that practice of you need the right model and the right pathway, but it's the ongoing practice of managing that. So you're not burning cash, that you are creating opportunity and then meeting demand with the building of your capacity at the same time. It's that ongoing practice of management that scaling is all about. Keeping healthy, keeping your team healthy, keeping the deal flow coming, building your business on the sales side, whilst managing a strong team and building that internal capacity. That ongoing practice of management is absolutely part of what scale's about. And so many times we're just talking about business models or things like that and getting the model right, but we don't talk enough about the ongoing practice of management as well. But we will in this program later on. And I know that's a lot of what you're dealing with as well. Celia, any final thoughts from you? And she?
I think for me, it's just kind of a little bit of today's, like, mostly just reinforcement of a few key things, and just knowing that other people have done it, and I think because for us it's just such an unknown, so for us I think just being a part of this kind of call is just a bit validating and kind of verifying things a little bit and giving us a space to get out of normal life and think about it a bit. So but there was a few key points raised for sure that we haven't thought about that much at all, which for no reason. We just haven't, like collaboration with other ecosystem players and things like that. I think we've been so focused on our own stuff and our own scaling that we haven't necessarily said okay, well, who's already doing this in this province and who should we talk to? It's been really internal, so that's quite a good thing for us to think about, I think.
Yeah, great. Good to hear. Nice one. And I hope actually as the seminars go on, there'll be more new stuff for you guys, because you're in good shape as well. But yeah, go in the right direction. Anybody else? Any final thoughts, Agnia? Any aha moments? Microphone.
Maybe we have to think a little bit more about the strategic partnership with the local government or local co-working spaces owners, so we can offer the licensing or partnership package to them. I think that's the aha moment.
Yeah, nice one. I think that's the big thing for me, is that in our industry, building those government links, building those strategic ecosystem players into our thinking of scaling, that our model is just not targeting the cohorts, that we absolutely need to build those ecosystem players and those linkages, and together, if we're working together as ecosystem partners, we can influence local government, national government, because they need to be part of the puzzle. So that constant building of the two sides of our pipelines is absolutely crucial. Yeah, so good, great. We've got a lot to do in building this up, hey? But it's a complex picture, but I think you guys are nailing it really, really well. So thank you everybody for contributing so well today. And from this start, I know it'll be a rapid pace every Monday, bringing people together, but hopefully, like Celia said, a chance just to be able to think scaling and in any different direction as well that you might want to talk about. Farah, did you want to add anything?
No, I just turned on
Just
the
coming
link. Yeah.
Yeah.
Log off for a week. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
Great.
good. Great. Well, I'm just going to very quickly share my screen just to show you one more thing. So can everybody see that? That's the quick look at the program as a whole. So this session was about before you scale. So some of these kind of early questions, pathways, strategic drivers, replication readiness, any of these sorts of things. In the next webinar, we're going to be covering design. So a bit more about the model side of things and some of the tactics you can use in the design of what you do that makes sure that you are, whether you're just, doesn't matter which model of scaling you're going to use, just making sure that you've got some of these things nailed that go beyond the value proposition that we'll all be doing with our cohorts and going into the design of some of the elements and dimensions of replication and of your scaling models, looking at the tactics for design and how that can influence really successful scaling. So that'll be in the next webinar that's coming out, hopefully in a couple of days' time. So we'll drop you a link on Slack for that. Then the rest of the program will be drip feeding all sorts around market development and scaling. We'll also have some webinars, sorry, not webinars, we'll have some case studies for you as well beyond the Social Enterprise Academy. So I'm excited to get those filmed and get those for you as well. So if you do have any burning questions or anything that you'd like us to cover, feel free to drop a note on Slack, and I will get that integrated most definitely. So I'm just about to film a case study with one of our colleagues from Africa, from Zambia, from Bongo Hive, which is a tech incubator. So it's going to give some interesting insight from their experience, and yeah, we'll see how that goes later today. So I'll hopefully integrate that to one of the next webinars. But before I lose you, the last question from me is, in terms of the webinar, any quick feedback on, for people who have watched it already, was it an okay length? Is it covering the right kind of stuff? Is it talking too fast? Anything like that? How do we feel at the moment? Is there anything you'd like us to do differently with the webinars, or is it going in the right direction? Any quick feedback on that from the first one? Your chance to make me improve what I do.
I think I cut it a little short. Maybe make it an hour.
Yeah. Okay. So, oh, hold on. Did you say longer or shorter? Shorter.
Yeah.
Shorter. Yeah. Cool. Great. Keep it brief. Anything else? Was it an okay watch? Did it give you enough stuff to go on, or was there too much content, too many things?
I think we could, yeah. My biggest feedback is we could make it briefer, like 1 hour, 60 minutes.
Yeah.
That would be ideal.
Do you mean this seminar, or do you mean the webinar that was posted?
This seminar.
This seminar. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Seminar we'll keep brief. Okay, I will assume then that the webinar is good enough. We'll do another of those and we'll see how we go. It's an interesting one, filming it without an audience and just doing a one-take Zoom presentation. So we'll keep that going. Okay, great. Right, thank you all for your time. That'll do us, and thanks for bearing with us with the late start. Reach out anytime on Slack if you've got any questions in the meantime. But we'll post the next webinar in a couple of days. And thank you all for contributing. Hopefully you'll come back next week. And I'm going to try some exercises in customer retention, which is all about scaling. So how many have we got on the call this week? 6, 7, 8 of us. We'll see if by session 6, we'll see if we've scaled up our attendance from 8, and we'll benchmark it at that point. And we'll do some customer metrics and all that sort of stuff, and give ourselves a little test of what improves our customer recruitment. Anyway, all right. Have great weeks, everybody. Thank you all for turning up, and yeah, keep it growing, eh?
Thank you so much, Sam. Bye.
Thank you, Sam.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.